Hello again. Now, it may be my imagination, or indeed the false memory syndrome, which is so common in old people, but I can't help thinking that we used to be a lot less anxious about the news than we are these days. I suppose the fact that we now have access to news 24 hours a day via the internet has something to do with it. After all, at one time we had to wait until the news in the evening before we heard what had been happening that day. Now we see it almost as it is happening, and in some cases through live streaming, actually as it is happening. I don't think, though, that this is the only explanation. Government agencies, local authorities, charities, newspapers, and the National Health Service all seem to be working together in tandem to create a permanent feeling that there is an emergency and that we are all in danger. The sunny weather over the last few days is a perfect example of this. In the description to this video, I give a fairly typical recent instance from Sky News. The headline reads, "Ambulance services under extreme pressure as on highest alert level as government considers declaring first ever national heatwave emergency. A level 4 national emergency could see widespread disruption to schools, travel, health services and even nuclear power plants." Ambulance services under extreme pressure. Surely I've seen that particular anxiety in the news before the sun began shining steadily a few days ago. Oh yes, that's right. I give a link to a BBC News item from a month ago. It is about somebody having to wait 5 hours for an ambulance and explains that the ambulance service is in crisis. Apparently response times are double what they were a few years ago. Oh, I also give a link to a news item from February 2021 about ambulance delays and how they were then at crisis point. In fact, skimming back through news stories, the next link is from 2011 and it tells us about, well, ambulance delays because the ambulance service was in crisis 11 years ago. For over a decade, the ambulance service has seemingly been in crisis, and we've had regular news stories telling us so. This is nothing at all to do with the sunny weather lately. It is a permanent state of affairs, and we are frequently reminded of the fact, although different reasons are given for the supposed emergency. I've gone on a bit about ambulances, but I could do the same thing with viruses like COVID, flu, AIDS, polio, many other types, which all seem to be, or monkeypox, come to that, they all seem to be cropping up in the news now, almost every day. These too are part of the permanent emergency, along with terrorism. If I were a suspicious man, and thankfully I'm not, I would think that for some reason there was a conspiracy to keep us all in a constant state of fear, and that this is because scared people are easier to control than normal, well-balanced folk tend to be. I don't say that this is so, but it certainly looks that way, and I'm beginning to be persuaded that it is actually a deliberate attempt to keep us in that condition. Casting my mind back a few years, I can remember things such as the flu epidemic of 1968 to 1970. I give a link to a paper on this epidemic published by Queen Mary University. It mentions in passing, and I quote, "The death rate attributed to flu, bronchitis and pneumonia was 10,500 in 1 week, right at the beginning of January 1970. But wait, you say, 10,500 people died of respiratory problems in a single week in this country? Why, that's 1,500 a day. Surely that's higher than the peak number of deaths from COVID, which saw 1,300 people die in a day in January 2021. Yes, that's right. Nobody even noticed at the time, though. I believe that in addition to the internet making it easier to access news constantly, there is a deliberate and coordinated effort to make us afraid, to keep people in a state of fearful anticipation about COVID, wars, terrorism, hot weather, and 100 other things. It's my belief that this is being done so that people can be stampeded like sheep and driven in the direction that our masters wish us to go.